Greetings, my friends, 'tis I, your host, the Mighty Blue Magus, and I didn't want to bring this show back. I really didn't. But, well, here it is, and it's going to be infrequent as usual because this is Minor Grievances, that show that I do, but only when I feel like it. Okay, so it's time to become Blue Magus the Salt Maker because I'm about to make a few people very, very grumpy by dropping some cold hard facts. This video is a follow-up to the 3-year-old episode of Minor Grievances, Anime vs. Cartoons, an episode in which I made the controversial statement that anime are cartoons. Now, a lot of people were really reasonable even if they disagreed with me, but a certain number of people just came at me with some of the strangest and most bizarre rebuttals I've ever heard in my entire life. Some of the most easily debunkable points I've ever encountered. And they did not take too kindly to me saying, no, you're wrong. I mean, one guy did it on and off again over the course of 2 years, and another guy did it over the course of 1. Must have struck a nerve. You know, I'll admit it was pretty annoying dealing with these people, especially when they just kept on saying the exact same points over and over and over again, no matter how many times they got debunked or how many people pointed out the problems with their argument. And a lot of them were also putting anime on some kind of higher plane of artistic expression. So, in response, I made an episode of Magus Reviews discussing some of the worst, most egregious examples of anime I've ever come into contact with. I'm still undergoing radiation therapy from Aiken, and if you can believe me, this is gonna scare you, but I've actually seen anime that makes Aiken look somewhat passable nowadays. Japan? What the hell are you making? So, for context, I'd recommend going and watching my first video on anime versus cartoons, and it's not really necessary, but you can watch the really bad anime video. But for the most part, I do think that some things need to be addressed, and as such, I will do so. In the past year or two, you won't believe the number of times I've heard dictionary definition fallacy. Mostly in other people's videos, but it has been pulled on me a couple of times. Yes, the appeal to definition fallacy is a logical fallacy because language is a constantly evolving thing, and all the dictionary is essentially a book that contains information about words that we all generally agree upon the meaning of. That being said, when people say that anime and cartoons are not the same thing, it's at least important to define what both of those things are. And at the time, I used the most current definition as given to me by Google. I mean, if you're going to tell me that an orange isn't an apple, then wouldn't your argument be best served by first telling me what an orange and an apple are? And to me, there's really no more basic and better place to get started than a simple dictionary definition. But as pointed out, the definitions are different now. Or are they? Anime. Noun. A style of Japanese film and television animation, typically aimed at adults as well as children. Cartoon. Noun. A simple drawing showing the features of its subjects in a humorously exaggerated way, especially a satirical one in a newspaper or magazine. 2. A motion picture using animation techniques to photograph a sequence of drawings rather than real people or objects. Yeah, they're both slightly different in the wording, but the overall meaning is the same. About the only thing that was changed was cartoon now includes animation. A good counterpoint against my original video would be that anime is animated, whereas cartoons are not by the Google definition. Well, now that point's moot, and if you will really notice, my argument is a lot stronger now than it was when I first made the video, because, if you will notice, cartoon does not specify a place of origin, meaning it can be just about anywhere. So if you really look, the only difference between anime and cartoon's Google definition is that anime is specifically Japanese. So that makes them a Japanese cartoon. This is not difficult, people. 2 + 2 = 4. Let's avoid any further backlashing crawling out of the dark corner of the internet. Let's dive into this rabbit hole a little bit further so I can illustrate exactly why anime are cartoons. Now, while someone pointed out that they generally agree with my video, they were looking for a more holistic argument. So, as such, I'm going to provide one. So if you guys know your history, then you will know that Japanese art originally looked like this. And and yet modern Japanese art looks like this.
Damn, she got big old pair of tits!
So how do we get from point A to point double D? Well, let's start with what is probably the oldest known Japanese animation in existence. It's short, at only 3 seconds long, and it's from 1907. It's actually pretty impressive given what they had at the time. I don't really have much to say about it other than including it for its important historical and cultural context, so that's just to show I've done my homework. My second example comes from 1917. It's crude, it's blocky, but if you look at the designs and its settings, it appears to be inspired by more traditional Japanese art. I said art, not fart. Who wrote this stupid script? But anyway, you can definitely see the resemblance, right? At least I hope you do, because explaining anything else going forward is going to be a pain if you do not. In fact, almost 30 years after that animation, Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors, which is the very first anime movie, also doesn't look very anime either. What the hell's going on? Now, we're jumping between decades here because we obviously can't go over every single show that was made between 1907 and 1963, but let's go into the very first serialized anime, Otogi Manga Calendar. And it looks like this. I would show you more, but it's considered lost at the time of this video, and copies are extremely hard to find. We're talking borderline impossible. There were 312 episodes apparently, so it's very likely that somebody somewhere has a copy of the home video releases, but I wouldn't hold your breath in seeing any of them. But again, I want to focus on how it looks. Well, gosh, that doesn't look very anime either. Of course it doesn't, because Japan frequently draws inspiration from Western animation studios. Danny, stop playing cheap, you know? Why don't you talk about something that's more traditionally anime? Something like... Go, 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 Astro Boy! Yeah, now we're talking. He's got the traditional anime touch in his design. Look at him, he's got the big eyes, the big head, the tiny nose, and... Hi-ho, the Mario! Oh. Well, would you look at that? Yep, once again drawing inspiration from Western animation studios, anime got its signature look from classic Disney. While this will undoubtedly change over time and more artistic variations come into play, one cannot deny the glaring similarities between early Disney and early anime. Look at Pinocchio and Astro Boy. They both have short bodies, big heads, big mouths, big eyes, and tiny noses. That's cheating, and you know it! Okay, well I guess his nose isn't that small, even when it is technically small, but the point still stands. They at least have a passing resemblance to one another, and the comparison isn't too far out there to make. And before you think I'm reaching for anything, the creator of Astro Boy and Japan's equivalent to Walt Disney is a man by the name of Osamu Tezuka, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and he made it no secret that Disney films were a huge influence upon his art style and was a major part of his life. He even met Walt Disney before and allegedly was in talks to begin working for Walt Disney. Must have been a dream come true, but for some reason or another he did not actually work for Walt Disney. But Astro Boy, no pun intended, took off, and people took the art style, and Japanese animation was changed forever, giving us shows like Tetsujin 28 Go, known here in the West as... and the first Japanese superhero, 8-Man, known here in the West as... So, to put this in perspective, no Disney, no Astro Boy. No Astro Boy, no Tetsujin 28. No Tetsujin 28, no Evangelion or Gundam. And although this is more speculation on my point, but since I grew up with this and looking at 8-Man, I'm gonna go ahead on a limb and say this. No Fleischer Studios Superman animations, no 8-Man. So if you really want to say that anime isn't a cartoon, at least classically, you got some splaining to do. Okay, so let's give us the benefit of a doubt and even throw out that entire argument, okay? Or let's say you didn't have someone like me to do the legwork and do all that historical background and research, right? Or let's just say this. Let's just say you just don't care about classical anime, right? Well, that's what this part of the video is for. So skipping all of that, let's at least ask the question. Let's go back to the oranges and apples thing. What is an anime? And what constitutes as an anime? And keep it in mind now, no definitions, because even though words have meanings, you can't use the definition because fallacies. If you have ever watched Bennett the Sage's show Anime Abandoned, and I would highly recommend watching it, he tried defining anime, and since he's very well read into older anime, his answer was simply, I know it when I see it. And I'll be honest, as vague as that is, I have to agree with him. Anime just looks and feels different than other cartoons. It's something distinct to anime, whether it be the writing, the art style, or the animation style. Nobody else does it like Japanese animators, right? Right? Right. Yeah. Yeah, right. Right? I'm setting you guys up for something later. So let's just say that it's, again, Japanese cartoons, or at least Japanese animation. Because cartoon is a dirty word, apparently. Careful, guys, I might lose monetization because of the C word. And I don't mean cunt. I have been saying swear words on YouTube for almost 10 years. Why do they suddenly care now? Somebody, find that out for me. Now, these are not the points made by people against me. I don't really trust random internet commenters to be diviners of animation wisdom, or wisdom in general, so instead I had to turn to people I watch all the time, like the aforementioned Bennett the Sage, journalists, anime historians, animation historians, etc. And I didn't go out looking to back up my original point that anime are cartoons as a confirmation bias, because that's probably going to be thrown out against me. Now, this segment is to deter the idea that I am not just doing a confirmation bias, but also erecting a straw man, because the people against me never said any of these points. Okay, look, I'm not directly responding to them. What I am trying to do with this video is to point out the similarities, both historically, culturally, and techniques-wise, between Western shows and Japanese shows. And I'm really hoping that everybody understands that anime is indeed cartoons. And I'm merely taking information from various trustworthy places to illustrate that while the common belief is that cartoons and anime are uniquely distinct from one another, I am pointing out that they are, in fact, virtually identical. And I'm going to try and put sources in the video's description, but I can't quite recall what episode Bennett the Sage said, I know it when I see it, so if anyone can point that out to me, just let me know. I will make a note in the description and link to that specific video where he said that and give a timestamp to it. I know he said it, I just can't quite recall where exactly he did say it, and I'm going to try and give a link to certain animes and certain historical points that I've gotten, like things from like Variety magazine or something like that, just so you get the general idea. But of course you are also encouraged to do your own research and find anything that I may have overlooked, missed, or even something that can contradict my points. By all means, think for yourself. Don't just nod your head and agree with me. I'm just pointing out what I see, how I see it, and I'm dropping fact bomb after fact bomb after fact bomb, okay? So with that, let's get back on track. Okay, so anime is distinctly a Japanese style, right? Okay, let's go with that. You just know it when you see it. Well, going back to my first video 3 years ago, my original point was that anime is distinctive from Western animation by its style and look, naturally being different in those two categories because it did come from an entirely different culture. Now, animation styles and art styles vary widely. Just look at Jinro the Wolf Brigade with its beautiful scenery, quiet tone, and more realistic art style. And then look at Dead Leaves. Jarring, isn't it? But they're still anime, and yet they vary widely in tone and art style. Just like American cartoons vary in tone and art style. How is anime anything but a cartoon at this point? Like, it's a Japanese cartoon, but it's still a cartoon. Have I convinced you yet?
No! Anime is special! It comes from Japan, and that makes it entirely different!
Does it? Does it really? Okay, prepare yourself, because if you're one of those people who thinks that anime and cartoons are distinct from one another, you might want to grab a helmet or body armor if you got it, because you're about to take a beating. A lot of your favorite animes have episodes outsourced to animation studios from foreign countries. Typically places like South Korea, Taiwan, the Philippines, some parts of China, and even India. Now, while it's true that most of your prototypical big-budget shows are animated by Japanese studios, a lot of the really, really big name ones like Naruto have episodes animated by South Korean studios. Okay, so if being from Japan is what makes something uniquely anime, then can you draw me a line here? Which part of Naruto is specifically anime, and which part of it is a South Korean cartoon? I need to know this, okay? So if you're saying, well, it's okay if anime is outsourced for animation purposes, it can still be anime. Well, guess what other country does that? Yep, American animation studios do precisely the exact same thing that Japanese studios do and outsource to foreign countries. South Korean studio ACOM in particular has animated some of the classics that Americans know and love. Shows like X-Men, Tiny Toon Adventures, The Tick, Batman the Animated Series, and even The Simpsons! Thank you, South Korea. You have done many good things for many people, and I don't mean Gangnam Style. Hey, my first video came out in 2013. Psy was relevant then. Is he still relevant now? I don't know. I don't follow South Korean music. And if you really want to get interesting, there's this one studio called Sex Studio, or SCK Studio, who animated a hentai called Taboo Charming Mother. And where is this studio located? Pyongyang, North Korea.
Dramatic reverb.
Is there anything more anime than hentai? And even that's being outsourced. To North Korea, of all places! Porn has been animated by the guys who made this! Wow, that's actually pretty well animated. Somebody save these people. They're very talented. Especially since they're working for pennies on the dollar and the threat of not being shot by Mr. Floppy Disk's Death Squad. Mr. Floppy Disk's Death Squad. I'm gonna use that one day. Trademark Blue Mages. So, we're done here, right? You know, I think I've just about pointed out every single similarity between cartoons and anime. Well, no. I've got one final point. Have you ever heard the phrase, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares? It's kind of like how all cats and dogs are animals, but obviously not all animals are cats and dogs. Well, if you ask me, I think that same thing applies to anime. And I'm being far more reasonable with this than you might think. Just ponder for a second. After I just laid out everything in front of you, I still think that anime is distinct from Western cartoons. And I know that in Japan, all cartoons are called anime because that's just their term for it. I even have this translated My Little Pony manga advertisement that calls it an anime for crying out loud. Now, if you're one of those people who just say cartoons for American shows and anime for Japanese shows just for the sake of it being easier, I guess that's okay. I mean, it makes sense actually, even if you're technically incorrect. I mean, if we're going to use the point of origin as a way of naming animation, then again, what do you call previously mentioned outsourced cartoons? And do other shows that don't outsource have a name for their cartoons? Like, what are German cartoons called, for example? Do British have a different name for cartoons, or do they take the English cartoon too? You see, to me, it's kind of confusing. I mean, I'm okay if you do it, but it's just a little weird to me whenever you say that anime are not cartoons. Because when you really boil it down from definitions, historical roots, cultural shifts, artistic presentation, they're still cartoons! Japanese cartoons, American cartoons, Taiwanese cartoons, Korean cartoons. Take your pick! They're all still cartoons. All anime are cartoons! But not all cartoons are anime, and until I am presented with information to the contrary that is 100% concrete, that's just how it's gonna be. Well, that was a bit pointless and overdue, but I guess I owe you guys a little more than a long-winded rant video that followed up to a 3-year-old rant video, don't I? Well, who said I was done with anime this month? I'll see you guys later. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this because it was a bit of a pain to gather everything for this and make. I am simply a one-man crew after all, so if you could, give me a like and share if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you haven't, or if you want to go the extra mile and support me, donate to my Patreon. This is not foreshadowing at all, and while we're at it, neither is this.